Should an arsonist be in charge of fighting fire? President Donald Trump has nominated an outspoken critic of the World Bank to become its next leader. David Malpass is currently Undersecretary for International Affairs at the U.S. Treasury Department. Traditionally, an American would lead the World Bank, while the International Monetary Fund, its twin international multinational lender, would be led by a European. The thing is, Malpass has been highly critical of the World Bank. He also made it clear that he would further the Trump administration's agenda for developing countries, and the efficiency of the World Bank has been under scrutiny, especially with the emergence of other lenders such as the AIIB initiated by China. Should the Western grip on top posts of the World Bank and the IMF be replaced by a merit-based system? What would be the likely consequences for developing countries if Malpass were to be confirmed? Joining me are Sitao, Chief Economist at Deloitte China, and from New York, Max Wolff, Chief Economist at the iCash Group. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. My first question, of course, as I said, it's a tacit agreement among Western countries that the top job of the World Bank goes to an American and the top job of the IMF goes to an European, and it has been like that for 70 years now. Should that practice, should that tradition, should that monopoly be finally broken, Sitao?
U.S. Was the founder or creator of the World Bank after World War II. The first World Bank president was appointed in 1946. Since then, the United States has been the largest shareholder of the World Bank, and followed by Japan in recent years. Perhaps one day, the largest shareholder will be another country, China, for example, India. Until then, I do think that position is likely to stay with the United States.
Wolff, Mr. Wolff, what's your opinion on this issue?
Yeah, so actually, I think it's not an official requirement that the person be American, and what the prerogative says is that the United States can appoint someone, not that that person has to be American, although that has been the historical tradition. I think the IMF and the World Bank still do many good and important things in the world, but they've struggled to appear modern. They've struggled with their popularity, and they sometimes struggled to be as relevant as they could and should be. And one important symbolic step toward that is recognizing that the world of 2019 is very different from the world of 1946, and that the sort of Eurocentrism of the world, the opinion about diverse cultures, backgrounds, opportunities, and insights has changed. And these institutions, should they be relevant largely in a world that's outside the United States and Europe, need to look for top talent in the places most likely to engage the World Bank and the IMF, which are actually not in Western Europe or the United States. Well,
Sitao, what's your reaction to that?
I'm not just saying we should look at what happened in 1946. I think there are indeed emerging global issues, for example, climate change. That's why today's metrics measuring the performance or qualification is indeed going to be different from 1946. I think at this point, it's too early to say whether Mr. Malpass is qualified, unqualified. I think if we look at the credentials in general, the presidents so far, they all have very long track record on Wall Street with financial institutions, with U.S. government. It's important to be able to work with a large bureaucracy. It's important, for example, to master a few foreign languages. In this case, Mr. Malpass can speak foreign languages.
So you're basically supporting Mr. Malpass's candidacy. But I want to ask this question. I mean, I understand that the United States has been the largest shareholder. But if you talk from that perspective, then probably the leadership of the world's biggest multilateral institutions many of these leadership positions would always stay in the hands of the United States. And when you are in such a leadership, you have a great influence on the policies. For instance, the voting rights, right, in the IMF. And China, the many developing countries have also struggled, have also asked to have greater share, and yet they are not able to do that precisely because of the monopoly on power by Western countries.
Let me clarify, right? I think actually things are indeed changing. And earlier, you have alluded AIIB, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, that was created by China. China is the largest shareholder the top position is being held by Chinese. In fact, AIIB is very much competing, I would say in a healthy manner, with the World Bank. So I wouldn't be taking such dogmatic view, saying because what happened in 1946, because the largest shareholder being the United States, things are remaining that way. I think things are changing anyway.
Well, in what way? Then till when? So, till what day will this selection process become merit-based? And by the way, to be merit-based, you also have the possibility of having talents from developing countries to serve this job, because at the end of the day, the purpose of the World Bank is to provide assistance for developing countries, which are actually at this moment primarily in sub-Saharan region. Sitao again.
Oh, sorry. Yes, you have raised some very good point. But I would like to stress the World Bank is not about international aid. In the end, you need to be held accountable for shareholders. China is one of the shareholders. So it's really not just about international aid. At the same time, of course, it's not an ordinary bank. It's about the development. That's why Africa is very important. The previous World Bank president, Mr. Kim, has done a few quite important initiatives in helping African continent. In fact, if you look at the loan portfolio under his stewardship, it has grown very rapidly. So, but at the same time, so all I'm saying is it's not about international aid. It's not about commercial lending. It's really about the mixed.
Okay, Mr. Wolff, your comments so far.
Yes, so I agree it's a unique institution, and obviously in order to provide service for the next group in need, they have to get the loans that they've put out repaid, so repayment is important. But my point is a little bit that the world economy looks different, leadership looks different, and the sort of where we take and draw the notion of leadership looks different. So I do think probably in order to be more accountable, institutions that have had a struggle to be seen as fair and reasonable in the developing world, where most of the loans and loan repayment issues have arisen, basically all of the loans go, almost all the loans and all the loan decisions have been sort of involved, probably makes sense to reach out to those organizations. And one way one does that is only symbolically with who's in charge, but I think much more important than who's in charge, which is largely symbolic. The question is, what is what is the mission? And I think somebody who has historically been a Republican Party operator and very sort of loyal and a bit of an ideologue, who has avidly supported an American First doctrine, for that reason, it's a little bit difficult then to ask the world to see that same person as advocating absolutely fairly for the needs of developing countries when they've taken a hard public partisan position in the past. I don't think David Malpass is unqualified or incompetent. My question is, can you be America first and world first globalization at the same time? I hope so, but I'm not sure that the world will be instantly convinced of that possibility.
Sitao.
Well, I think for David Malpass, I think in order for him to get a job, in fact, to get into the transitional team after the U.S. election, he definitely has to demonstrate certain loyalty. I mean, that's a given. That happens everywhere. But being president of the World Bank, I think he's going to be under very different scrutiny, and he will be subject to many, many constraints. Bear in mind, World Bank is not a very straightforward organization. It's a super national agency and existing since 1946. So, I mean, he cannot just be doing whatever he wants to do. He will be under a lot of scrutiny.
I hope so. However, what we have learned in the media about his competence is also kind of causing some people to scratch their heads when they hear about his candidacy. For instance, he failed to predict the onslaught of the 2008 financial crisis when he was leading Bear Stearns, the financial institution, and some other very big, important mistakes that he did in forecasting the economy. How do you explain that, Mr. Tao?
Well, first of all, people do make mistakes. Hindsight is easy. I mean, really, what has happened in 2007, 2008, again, was a very unique situation. it's not just about the housing market, it's not just about labor market, not just about unemployment. It's really about highly toxic, complicated derivative product, and almost no one got that right. So I wouldn't be too harsh just on him because he was taking a relatively bullish view on the U.S. economy in 2008.
Another thing is there has never been a female on the top post of the World Bank. Why is it not time to introduce one now? Sitao?
Well, the managing director of IMF, Christine Lagarde, is a female. So, I mean, that's...
that balances it?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Well, finally, another very important point, I think, is also his reported lack of experience in the field of development, which is crucial in this field. Mr. Wolff, I want to hear your comment in this field, because he has mostly worked within the Republican Party. He has actually has very little experience in dealing with developmental issues, which is primarily going to be his focus if he's ever confirmed or selected as head of the World Bank. Mr. Wolff, how do you look at the blank there in his portfolio so far?
Yeah, so I mean, I think our last World Bank president was actually an interesting World Bank president, even though he comes from the sciences and not really from economics. I do think that David Malpass there has an unusual bio for the job in the sense that he hasn't displayed a lot of international engagement. He's been sort of an executive and a domestic policy advisor of the Republican variety, and much of his career has actually been in close compatriot work with Larry Kudlow, who's the president's economic advisor. So it looks like they're a little bit of a sort of a team, and now he needs to absolutely not be on the U.S. or a political party team. He actually has to be on the team that advocates for the developing world.
Okay.
It's doable, but again, there's not much in the past that suggests he's perfectly suited for the job.
All right, we're going to keep a close watch on the situation. Many thanks to Sitao, Chief Economist at Deloitte China, and Max Wolff, Chief Economist at the iCash Group. And that's it for this edition of The Point with me, Li Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with LX. Download the application called CGTN to watch the show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point.